If you have an open sales position and you need a hunter, someone who will go out and identify and convert new opportunities on their own, do you even know what to look for? Well, if you're not sure, stick around. We're going to take a look. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. So good to have you alongside as we keep the show rolling. It is your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. And if you've got a moment, if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone. Share it with a sales leader you know, someone who needs to be in on this conversation about what do we need to do differently in terms of training salespeople, because frankly, the way we train them now doesn't appear to be working. Well, who says? Well, the numbers say so. Apparently, 1 out of 4 salespeople, roughly, are either elite or pretty good, could be better with training. 3 out of 4, not so much. And the bottom 25%, well, according to the data, they are absolutely hopeless. So we want to see, is there anything that we're doing as sales leaders, as organizations, that will improve the results that we get? And I absolutely believe that you can definitely improve the results that you get. You just got to be willing to change some very systemic things that everyone's been doing forever. Yes, we train salespeople just about the same way we did 3 or 4 decades ago. How do I know? Well, because I've been around that long. That's why. Hey, this week's episode of Sales Untraining, we talk about finding hunters. Now, if you're like every other sales leader on the planet, you would love to have someone who can go out and identify and convert new opportunities, and they can do it on their own. Well, you're thinking, yeah, but I need a key account manager. I need someone, we've already got the account. We need them to go in and mine that account, farm it, make it more productive, create stronger relationships. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. And that in and of itself very much proves that not all salespeople are the same. As a matter of fact, when I was a sales leader in the orthopedics industry, I had to hire someone for a territory that was pretty well developed. It had a very successful track record. And one of the first things I had to do was to hire someone to replace someone in that territory. And I found an individual who turned out to be an absolute find. Just absolutely amazing. Clients loved him. Clients couldn't say enough good things about him. And he grew the territory incrementally over time. Just developed those accounts and got deeper into them. And just, again, everybody loved the guy, but we expanded his territory. Now, I was the leader, my idea, and I'm thinking this individual is going to kill it. I mean, he is absolutely amazing in farming these opportunities. And now I'm going to put him in an opportunity where he can go out and add to the pie. He can create some new stuff. And what happened? Well, you might be ahead of me. He didn't do that well. And it's interesting because at that point in time, as a very young first-time sales leader, I didn't know what the problem was. I'm shaking my head like, this individual's fantastic in this arena, but not so much over here. Well, I had taken that individual in, introduced them to all of the big accounts, and sort of hand-walked him in and, introduced him and giving him, that seal of approval, as it were. And he was pretty well trained, frankly. And so he did quite a good job, but the relationships existed. They just needed to be transferred to him. He needed to take ownership of them and then begin to develop the account, which he did amazingly well. Didn't do so well going out into greenfield territory and developing some brand new opportunities. Why? What's the difference? Well, what we know intuitively is that hunters and farmers, as they are typically referred to, generically speaking, they're quite different. And you can have one who's great in one arena and not in the other. Most farmers are not good hunters. Doesn't mean they can't learn, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Number two, most hunters are typically not great farmers. They can be, and there are some that do both. In my work, I did both. Don't know why, but I did. I could develop existing and I could create new. But in many ways, they're almost different skill sets at some level, or at least different mindsets. And we'll talk about that. So do you know what to look for? I mean, typically when you're interviewing someone and you need a hunter, you need someone to go out and create new opportunities. Most of us do. Most of us, when we're hiring a salesperson, we need to find a hunter. And so we begin to look at the resume, and we begin to look at, what they've done in the past. Do they have a history of success? Were they the top salesperson in the past? Did they develop a territory in some way? And it says, I took a territory from $1 million to $3 million. And we go, there you go, hunter. Then we hire them, and turns out not so much. You're shaking your head. What happened? Well, the reality is the way we acquire leads or opportunities as a salesperson can vary dramatically. I have seen really fantastic salespeople on paper, top salesperson in a company, come over to a new opportunity, a new sales position, and fail miserably. Why? Because they were required to open up a brand new territory, develop new relationships, identify the right opportunities, run them through the sales process, and they just didn't have the mindset for it, and they didn't have the skills for it. Hang on a second. You talked about two things here, mindset and skill set. Yes. But before I get there, so you're saying, well, where did they get all their leads? Well, in many cases, there may be a nice set of inbound leads coming in that get funneled to the appropriate people. And, you're in an organization where you've been there 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and you're very technically adept. You know the product and the markets and the applications better than anyone else. The really important leads, when they come in, go to you. Well, you've got enough inbound to keep you afloat. And yes, that happens. And you're telling everyone you're the top salesperson in the company. And yet you've never had to actually identify, pursue, convert brand new opportunities from scratch. And it happens a fair amount of time. And there are a number of other factors. I won't go into detail, but there are ways in which you can have someone who appears fantastic on a resume. Turns out they're not a hunter. So recently, I had the opportunity to go out with law enforcement and do a ride-along. And I was privileged in the fact that, even though I didn't know it at the time, as it turned out, I was going out to work with someone and a couple of other people that this individual worked with, that they characterized themselves as hunters. Now, what they were doing is, instead of sort of setting on the sidelines in a benign fashion and you're shooting radar at a car and catching them speeding and pulling them over, they were actually pursuing leads or calls on the radio that might portend some type of problem or issue, and they were hunting for the opportunity to impact that, to intervene in some way, if necessary, as a law enforcement officer. So I got into a really interesting conversation with the law enforcement officer. What are you looking for? And he looked at me kind of strange, and he said, I really don't know how to explain it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, first off, what we're doing, not everybody does. A lot of people are quite happy, and we need these kinds of people. He's not criticizing them at all, but we need the kind of people that do what I talked about. They post up on highways or streets and look for speeders and automobiles that aren't operating correctly, or whatever the case may be. But that's not who we are. And frankly, this individual told me, that's not something I would enjoy doing. I like to hunt. I like to create. I like to make things happen. And it's a mindset. And I went, wow. Right? Because it is. It's very much a mindset. In riding along with this individual and a couple of other people that I intersected with along the way, You could tell it was very much a thought process, and their language and what they were doing, their tactics reflected the fact that this is something that they do. And it really stood out to me. There's two completely different approaches in a very generic sense to law enforcement. One is to sit and wait and look and have the opportunity to come to you. The other one is to go look for the opportunity based on a set of circumstances and clues and things that you observe. For example, we're on the move and we're driving past a particular address, and we see an automobile that doesn't look quite right. It's got a headlight out, and there are some people involved in what could be construed as some questionable activities. And all of a sudden, you could just tell all the alarm bells were going off, and we're checking it out. And I'm asking, what are you looking for? He goes, this isn't common. Normally, you don't see this. And in this particular set of circumstances, it may mean that there's something going on. And as we turned around to go back to just take another run and take a look, they had already taken off and gotten lost. Well, that was all night long. We were doing things like that and made many stops and pulled people over based on clues, things on the radio, those kinds of things. And in one instance, actually responded to a carjacking call, got a description of a suspect, went out looking in various parts of the area where that person might be going or traveling to get away, and found the individual. And he found this individual just based on description of clothing. And I'll never forget, I heard him say, "What are the odds?" And he pulled that individual over based on probable cause and very rapidly figured out this is the person who was assumed to have committed this particular crime. But it just stood out to me. It was a mindset based on something that you want to do. I want to suggest to you, salespeople who hunt are the same way. Are there exceptions? Sure. I am absolutely positive we can find some who may not be wired up that tight in terms of going out and finding brand new opportunities and looking for new prospects and those kinds of things. On the other hand, I see a lot of people who absolutely are great farmers, good salespeople, have pretty good skills in front of people, develop strong relationships, ask good questions, consultative seller, all of those things, but they don't hunt and they don't like to hunt. And so if you hire someone with the right skills and the wrong mindset, I can assure you 90+% of the time, you're going to be disappointed. You've got to find someone who has a mindset for it. Then the skills become important. Do they know how to identify, qualify, pursue, convert new opportunities? That's a whole nother conversation. First, how do we go about identifying a true hunter? Well, there is a tool that you can use, and I'll say this as an aside. Objective Management Group, OMG, whom I'm affiliated with, we use an assessment that assesses 21 very specific sales competencies for salespeople. And it is 90% predictive. And that is validated by an outside entity. That's just not a generic claim or something they hope for. They've actually had it validated year after year. One of the competencies is, yes, you guessed it, hunting. So that gives me a very good indication. But when I get into the conversation, the interview with that particular applicant, I need to be able to ask about their ability to hunt. And certainly I want to ask things like, have you had to identify and create your own opportunities? My experience is almost everyone will say, well, yeah, certainly, of course. Then I want to ask the second question, give me an example. Tell me how you did it. And this is the point where you have to really turn off everything except your listening and your perception and listen to what they're saying. And you need to dive underneath the first answers. If the answers are vague, ask follow-up questions. If they begin to get into it, ask follow-up questions. You need to be tactically curious about how they do, what they do, when they do, how they do those things matters. And the more you find the right people, you'll see a very specific type of approach and a type of mindset. And I can ask follow-up questions like, do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy hunting for new opportunities? What do you think it takes to be effective to identify and convert new opportunities from scratch? Ask their opinion, walk them through their ideas, and dig deeper. You see, being a great interviewer is very much like being a great salesperson. Not only do you have to ask a great question, but you have to listen very carefully so you can ask really insightful follow-up questions. That's where the gold is. That's where they will be able to prove the point, or they'll fall apart as you begin to expand into more details, and they can't provide that. Because resumes will fool you 90% of the time. That's my number, anecdotally, 90% of the time. Because the way people are coached to write their resumes and to portray themselves in the very best possible light, they can tell you, for example, I took a $1 million territory and turned it into a $5 million territory in 2 or 3 years or whatever. And people read that and go, wow, that's amazing. This person's going to be fantastic. They're a hunter. They're experienced. They're in our industry, and they've grown a territory. But you have no idea how. And you simply cannot take those things for granted, because every time you hire the wrong person, if you need a hunter and you don't get one, it is very, very expensive. Well, coming up, one thing you absolutely must do if you need to hire that hunter that will help you avoid making a big mistake. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. Well, the other side of that is we get 3 sentences into the conversation and you're already selling me something. I mean, you're already, oh, well, hey, you need that? Well, that's what we do, and we're great at it. In fact, we're the best at it. We've been around longer than anybody else. Let me tell you about our product. Pull out a brochure, pull out a sample, pull out something. Start talking about your product, your service right out of the chute. And if you're listening to this, you can't see it, but if you're on YouTube, you can see the customer. I mean, they just really, you can see them fall back in their chair, cross their arms. It's like, oh boy. Okay, so how do I get out of this mess? Because the last thing I want, less than 3 minutes into a conversation with you, is for you to start selling me something. Welcome back to Sales Untraining. Hey, by the way, let me ask you again, have you liked and subscribed to the podcast? If not, I certainly hope you will. And again, I hope you'll share it with someone. In the first segment, I was talking a little bit about law enforcement. And frankly, law enforcement in this day and age can be a polarizing topic. And someone watching or listening to this podcast may have thought, aha, I know what that law enforcement officer was doing. He was profiling people. Well, you couldn't be more wrong. Because it was based on a whole lot of factors, and not one time did I ever hear a single reference in any way towards race or any other thing. As a matter of fact, this individual pulled over a number of cars, multiple cars, with violations or speeding or something, and went out and talked to the individual and came back, and we left. And I said, what was that one all about? Well, they were 50 and a 35. And you didn't write them a ticket? Nope, did not. Talked to them about what they're doing. They were very respectful. And I just asked them to be more careful, slow things down, make things safe. I mean, I was shocked. I'm like, wow. And I said, so do you do that on a regular basis? He goes, people that are respectful to law enforcement, I really like to try to cut them a break as much as possible. And I saw him do it on multiple occasions, in a couple of occasions where I thought, I'm sure this individual is going to get ticketed somehow. but did not happen. But it was more about identifying circumstances and nuances and clues and looking at behaviors and seeing things that didn't make sense, even things as benign as how people would respond when they recognized that law enforcement was near them, either behind them or up next to them or whatever. In fact, there was a couple of comical instances where people obviously became aware of his presence when they didn't have any idea, and it was amazing how dramatically they changed their behavior. Well, I say all that to say this, is the point here is the mindset of what that individual is trying to do his job. And that's what we're talking about with salespeople. We need to find people who will hunt, if indeed the role that you're hiring for requires it. If you need growth and you need that individual to develop opportunities, you better find the right person. You can't just look at a resume and see success and say to yourself, here's the one, because you could be absolutely wrong. But there's one thing that you absolutely must do if you're going to avoid a hiring mistake. And this is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And that is, before you offer the job, or as you are in the process of a discussion of offering them the job, you need to set crystal clear expectations of what your role requires. If all you're doing is hiring a salesperson because we have an open salesperson position, then you're not hiring correctly. Every sales scenario, every opportunity, every region, territory, position is different and requires different things. Are you hiring someone to open up a brand new territory or to take over a long-standing territory and grow it incrementally? Are you looking at rapid expansion? Are you looking at new product growth? What do you need, and how much of it do you need, and what are your time frames? If you're not crystal clear what you're hiring them to do, what results you expect them to create, not generically, not sales, not revenue, but specifically, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment and potentially failure. So if I need someone to actually go out and identify, develop opportunities, take them through the sales process, qualify them in or out rapidly, and then take them through the balance of the sales process, you better ensure that that individual understands that very clearly, that they know when you say, I want to be crystal clear, this territory does $1 million, and we are hiring someone to take it to $3 million in 2 years, as an example. To do that, you will be required to prospect and identify new opportunities consistently on your own. Will we provide some leads? Yes. Will we go to trade shows for the opportunities to create leads? Yes. But ultimately, it is on your shoulders to prospect. And in our experience, here's how many new opportunities you will need to develop on a quarterly basis. Assuming you close fill in your number, 1 in 3, here's how many opportunities I will personally require you to identify and develop. That means you're going to have to work through this many leads to funnel it down to potential opportunities, to funnel it down to qualified opportunities. And that is a requirement on the job. So when we do our one-on-ones, when we discuss what's going on out there, I'm going to expect to hear from you the results of consistent prospecting. If you fail to do that, then someone's going to get into this job and they're going to think that perhaps it works like their old jobs, or you're going to provide opportunities, or if you're vague or generic or generalized about how much prospecting and you don't identify it as a non-negotiable expectation in the role, then you should prepare to be disappointed. Hey, doing what you do as a sales leader is very, very, very hard. Let's make it a little easier by making sure that we communicate with great clarity what the requirements of that position are. Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm Kelly Riggs. This is Sales Untrained.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.